in his presence before. Therefore the king said to me, "Why is your face sad, since you are not sick? This is nothing but sorrow of heart." So I became dreadfully afraid and said to the king, "May the king live forever. Why should not my face be sad when the city, the place of my father's tombs, lie waste and its gates are burned with fire?" And then the king said to me, "What do you request?" And so I prayed to the God of heaven. And I said to the king, "If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, I ask that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's tombs, that I may rebuild it." And then the king said to me, and the queen also sitting beside him, "How long will your journey be, and when will you return?" And so it pleased the king to send me, and I set him a time. And furthermore I said to the king, "If it pleases the king, let letters be given to me for the governors of the region beyond the river, that they must permit me to pass through till I come to Judah. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he must give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel, which pertains to the temple, for the city wall, and for the house that I may occupy." And the king granted them to me according to the good hand of my God upon me. And then I went to the governors in the region beyond the river, and gave them the king's letters. Now the king had sent captains of the army and horsemen with them. And when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard of it, they were deeply disturbed that a man had come to seek the well-being of the children of Israel. Let's bow our heads. Father, Lord, again, we just thank you for your word. We thank you for the stories of the Old Testament, Lord. And we thank you for the truths that lie within. And so, Father, today we pray that you might reveal those truths that you'd have us to understand today, that we might apply them to our lives, that might help us to grow to be more and more like your Son, Jesus Christ. We'll just thank you now, and we'll just praise you in Christ's name. Amen. One of the things that as I look at the world, and specifically even the Church of God today, that I see that seems to be lacking, and that is faith. I don't know how many times I've come across Christians in the last few years that simply stated has just simply lost their faith. Faith in God. Faith that God can accomplish anything in their lives. And so this morning I want us to look at that subject, the subject of faith. There was a young woman who brought her fiancé to meet her parents. And after dinner, the father asked the young man into his study for a chat. And so he says, "What are your intentions and plans?" The young man said, "Well, I'm a theology scholar." The father replied and said, "Well, that's admirable. Well, what will you do to provide a nice home for my daughter?" "I will study and God will provide," he explained. "And how will you afford to raise children?" "God will provide." Well, the man left the study, and the mother asked her husband, "How did it go?" He says, he has no money or employment plans, but on the other hand, he thinks I'm God. Mary Gardner Brainerd said this, "I would rather walk in the dark with God than to go alone in the light. I would rather walk with him by faith than walk alone by sight." Oswald Chambers said this, "Faith never knows where it is being led, but it loves and knows the one who is leading." It was a mild October afternoon in 1982, and Badger Stadium in Madison, Wisconsin was packed. Over 60,000 die-hard University of Wisconsin fans were watching their beloved football team take a beating by Michigan State. And what seemed odd was that as the score became more and more lopsided, there seemed to be more and more cheers and applause that could be heard from the stands. And it was only natural that some of the people began to wonder what kind of strange people it is that would be cheering while their team is being pumped. And as it turned out, 70 miles away from Badger Stadium, the Milwaukee Brewers were beating the St. Louis Cardinals in Game 3 of the World Series. And many of the Badger fans that were in the stands were listening to portable radios and responding to something else besides what was happening right in front of their eyes. You see, in this arena, a lopsided defeat, but in that arena, victory. And you know, in many ways, that is a fairly accurate description of what the Christian life is like. You know, we might be in the midst of horrible circumstances right now, but yet we have something to hold on to. Something that we may be able to not see yet, but know that God will give to us with confidence by faith in just a matter of time. We may not understand it, we may not see it right now, but by faith we know that God is going to take care of that situation. If not in this life, in the next. And so this morning I want us to see several things concerning that of faith. And the first thing I want you to understand is that faith may require patience. In verse 1 of our text, it says, in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes. And one of the things that we see in the previous chapter is that Nehemiah was spending several months, in fact around 4 months, praying for his beloved people there in Jerusalem. Nehemiah has been in prayer and periods of fasting before the Lord for 4 months concerning the plight of the people there in Jerusalem. He was very burdened for his people there. Once heard a story of a man who got lost in the desert. And after wandering around for, seemed like an eternity, his throat began to become very dry. And it was about that time that he looked up and he saw an old shack in the distance. He made his way over to the shack and he found a water pump with a small jug of water in a note. The note read, pour all the water into the top of the pump to prime it. And if you do this, you will get all the water that you need. Well, now the man had a choice to make. If he trusted the note and poured the water in and it worked, he would have all the water that he needed. But if it didn't work, he would still be thirsty and he might even die. Or he could choose to drink the water in the jug and get immediate satisfaction, but it might not be enough for him to be able to live. After thinking about it for a short period of time, the man decided to risk it. He poured the entire jug into the pump, and he began to work the handle. And at first, nothing happened. He began to get a little bit frightened, but he kept on going, kept on pumping, and finally water started pouring out. So much water came out that he drank all that he wanted, took a shower, and filled all the containers that he could find. And because he was willing to give up momentary satisfaction, he got all the water that he needed. Now the note also said, after you have finished, please fill the jug for the next traveler. Well, the man refilled the jug and he added to the note, please prime the pump. Believe me, it works. You know, we have the same choice to make in our lives as well. Do we hold on to what we have because we do not believe that there is anything else in store for us? Do we settle for immediate satisfaction of the things of this world? Or do we trust God and give it all up that we may have all the promises that God has given us? You see, I think the choice is pretty obvious. We need to pour in all the water. We need to trust God in everything. And then once we experience what God has to offer, the living water, then we need to tell other people about it. We need to leave the notes so others can understand the joy it is to experience all that God wants us to have. You see, we need to go ahead and prime the pump and tell others, believe me, it works. Let there be no doubt that when God's people sense that something needs to be done, a heart needs to be changed, or a church needs to be revived, or a nation needs to be turned, God calls upon His people to pray. Whenever there's the greatest need in the lives of His people, God calls us to pray. And not only to pray, but to persist in prayer. In Luke chapter 18 and verse 1, Jesus told His disciples a parable to show them that they should always pray and not give up. Second thing about faith I want you to see this morning is that faith demands responsible service. Look again at verses 1 and 2. It says, "And it came to pass in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, that he took the wine and he gave it to the king. Now, I had never been sad in his presence before, and therefore the king said unto me, Why is your face sad, since you are not sick?" Now, as the king's cupbearer, Nehemiah was responsible to see that the food and the drink that was given to the king was safe. That was his primary responsibility. He would personally make sure that neither was poisoned. And in his role, he was trusted by the king, and the king trusted him that he would show up each and every day. You see, that was vital to the king, because the king wanted to eat each and every day. So Nehemiah had to be there, had to continue in his service. And you see, I think that's a very important point. Something that we need to think about. Because it's important that Nehemiah continued on in his service. Yes, he was waiting for God to answer his prayers, but in the time that he was waiting for God to answer his prayers, he didn't just stop. He continued serving the king, serving God. Was he somewhat distracted? Probably. Might he have feelings of depression from time to time? Most likely. Was he weary and worn out from his prayer and fasting? Definitely, because we're told in the scripture he was. But he still showed up and he did his job. And no matter how many problems we have in our lives, no matter how many things that we're dealing with, no matter how many prayers we're praying, one thing we need to realize is that we need to continue on in our service. Faith demands responsible service. Some might question Nehemiah, because he made this statement. He said, "I had not been sad in the king's presence before." But obviously, by making that statement, he had been sad previously. And some might question and say, is that right? Isn't that like denial or something for Nehemiah to act like everything's okay? That's putting up a false front. Is that okay to do? Many might say, well, he should have been sad earlier. He should have been honest with the king. He should have let King Artaxerxes know that he was bummed out. And some have a philosophy, if you feel it, say it and show it. Don't hide it. And in most cases, I kind of agree with that, but not in all cases. Sometimes I disagree with that. Because I think sometimes we fall into the trap of settling for human sympathy, and we miss out on what God has for a solution. We walk around and we put our burdens on public display. And we look miserable. People feel sorry for us, and that seems to bring satisfaction to our lives. After all, we start to become the center of attention. And that feels good. Jesus talked about this misguided trade-off in Matthew chapter 6, verses 16 through 18. Jesus said, when you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show men that they are fasting. I tell you the truth. They have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to men that you're fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. See, while we wait for God's answer, until orders change, we need to continue to serve. The third thing I want you to see about faith this morning is that faith may require taking risks in our lives. Rule number one about serving a king: don't be a butler. Do not bring the king down with your problems. You see, to enter the presence of the king's side or to talk about your problems was very risky. A king wanted to be served and to be made happy. Nehemiah was literally taking his career, if not his own life, in his hands by letting his burden show to the king there that day. What he did was a very dangerous thing. And the point about being authentic with God is, yes, we need to be authentic. We need to make sure that we are not putting up a front. But we also need to understand that there are some times in our lives that we have to just simply trust God. You see, Nehemiah was not seeking the sympathy of King Artaxerxes that day. He realized that he was the only one human that was able to help his cause. And so that day, God had placed the burden on his heart so much, so heavy, that he could not deny it. In his face, he showed it. And you see, this was an all or nothing day for Nehemiah. It was not a pity party at all. He realized that this was his chance. And sometimes faith requires taking risks. Sometimes we have to just simply trust God and take a risk in our lives, no matter what. Fourth thing about faith I want you to see is that faith and prayer are inseparable. Look at verse 4. It says, "Then the king said to me, 'What do you request?' 'What do you request?' And so I prayed to the God in heaven." This, I believe, is a powerful example and more evidence of the kind of man that Nehemiah was. He had been in prayer for 4 months. He's weary, he's worn by his prayer and his fasting. And now, it's an all and nothing moment. He pauses in his heart to pray again. And I want to remind you the prayer that Nehemiah had been praying in chapter 1, verse 11. We see the kind of prayer he's been praying. That prayer was simply, "Give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of this man." And I think it's completely fair to assume that Nehemiah's daily prayer was, "God, give me success today. Give me favor with the king today." But that he waited until the right moment. He waited until the exact moment was right, and here it is. He stops and just asks, "Lord, is this it? Is this the moment that I've been praying for? I've been praying that you would grant me favor, and I need the courage to step out and do so." Because Nehemiah realized by telling the king what he was going to tell him, it might mean his own life. I found a quote that I just loved about this important moment in Nehemiah's life. "Success comes when 1,000 hours of preparation meet one moment of opportunity." And here's Nehemiah's one moment of opportunity. And so we need to realize that faith and prayer are inseparable. Faith will be lacking in one's life if your prayer life is lacking as well. And then the fifth thing I want you to see is that faith and planning are not enemies. In verses 5 through 9, we read it, I answer the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city of Judah, where my fathers are buried, so that I may rebuild it. And then the king with the queen sitting beside him asked, how long will your journey take? When will you come back? And it pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. And I also said to him, if it pleases the king that I have letters to the governors of Trans-Euphrates, so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive at you. And may I have a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, so that he will give me timber and make beams for the gates of the citadel by the temple, and for the city wall, and for the residence that I will occupy. And because the gracious hand of my God was upon me, the king granted my request. So I went to the governors of Trans-Euphrates and gave them the king's letters. The king had also sent army officers and cavalry with him. Please do not think that faith means always flying by the seat of your pants, because it doesn't. It requires planning as well. Faith and planning, prayer and planning, they do coexist, and they must coexist in our Christian lives. The key to the relationship is found in verse 8. It says, because the gracious hand of God was upon me, the king granted his request. That's the key. Psalm 127 verse 1 says, unless the Lord builds the house, its builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchmen stand guard in vain. Unless God is a part of your life, unless he blesses you, you'll not see the great things that he wants you to see. It's important for Nehemiah to pray, because the king had been against his rebuilding of Jerusalem. He'd always been against that. So Nehemiah started praying. For 4 long months he started praying that God might change the heart of Nehemiah. But it was also important that Nehemiah planned, because when God had touched the heart of the king asked what Nehemiah needed. And Nehemiah answered with certainty. You see, it was critical that Nehemiah understood and had a plan. The king asked him, what do you need? And he was able to give him an answer, exactly what he needed. He needed the building materials, he needed the notes, the letters to the kings. He had a plan. And then God adds the bonus. Did you catch that bonus that God added here? He moved in the king's heart to do even more. Because Nehemiah says that he sent with him officers and soldiers to protect him along the way. He didn't ask for that. The king blessed him. Then the last thing about faith I want you to see is that faith may bring opposition. Look at verse 10. It says, when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard of it, they were deeply disturbed that a man had come to seek the well-being of the children of Israel. Simply put, God's leading and blessings does not necessarily mean that there's no trials or opposition. Along with faith, many times there will be opposition. Many times when we put our faith in God, there's going to be others that's going to go up against us in our lives. I want to close by telling the story that I've told probably several times from this pulpit over the years. There was a man by the name of Blondin. He was a famous French tightrope walker and acrobat. His greatest fame came in 1859 when at the age of 35, he walked a 110-foot tightrope suspended 160 feet above the waters of Niagara Falls. And Blondin went on to walk across the falls several times, each time with a different theatrical fire. One on one trip, Blondin crossed over the falls pushing a wheelbarrow. Then he reached the other side and he asked the spectators if they believed that he could do it again. Everyone cheered and was excited. And Blondin then asked if they believed that he could again cross the tightrope with someone in the wheelbarrow. And again, everyone cheered, believing that he could do it, and wanted to see this miraculous and incredible stunt. Blondin then asked for a volunteer to ride in the wheelbarrow. And guess what? No one stepped forward. It was one thing to believe that Blondin could do it, but it was another thing to put their life in the hands and allow him to push them across the falls on a high line. Beloved, I hope and pray that you're willing to get into the wheelbarrow and let God lead you in your life. That you've got enough faith to get in the wheelbarrow and allow God to push you and to lead you. And so I ask you this morning, won't you get into that wheelbarrow and let God lead you today? Let's bow our heads. Father, again, we just praise you. We thank you for your love and your guidance in our lives. Lord, help us to have faith in you in all things. Help us to exercise that faith in our lives. Just trust you to lead us. Lord, yes, there'll be opposition. Yes, there'll be problems in our lives that we have to go through. But Lord, help us to continue to have that faith in you as our God and as our Savior. For I pray in Christ's name. As we stand right now, as God's Holy Spirit speaks to your heart and your life, if God is speaking to you to make a decision today, I pray that you'll make it. Maybe that God is telling you for the very first time in your life that you need to trust Him and put your faith in Him. Maybe someone here today that never has trusted Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior of his or her life. And you realize that you're lost without Him. And I pray today that you'll just trust in Him, that from the very first verse of this time of invitation, that you might just come and say, Brother Wally, I want to trust Him today. I want to be saved. I want to make sure that I go to heaven when I pass from this life. Maybe other decisions that you have today that God is speaking to you. Whatever that decision is, won't you make it today? Won't you just step out, come on the very first verse, and say, Brother Wally, God is speaking to me right now. This is what I know I need to do. As we all sing this song of invitation, won't you come? Won't you trust me today? Put your faith as we sing.